Okay.
All right. 2 seconds.
Ready?
Don't go away. I'm Nancy McNabb, president of the Eden Valley Historical Society. I want to thank you all for coming tonight. This will be kind of a fun presentation. I got to see a little snippet what he has and what he's going to share with us. It's pretty cool information. So I'm going to just turn it over to the expert. This is Alton Chermak, and he's going to be our presenter this evening. And welcome.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the invitation. Just by way of background, I have a lot of interest in transportation, commerce in general, and history. And my first recollection of ever being in Eden Valley took place in about 1970, just a very short visit. I was trying to get through town. After school and military service, I had a 30-year career with the railroads and the materials management field. It was great work and very enjoyable. I did get around quite a bit. After coming back to St. Cloud 15 years ago, I continued my interest in the construction and operation of the early railroad that came through here in 1886. We've got a few situations here with technology, different file types, and my unfamiliarity with the screen, so I may have to ask for Nancy's assistance here as we go along. What I'd like to do this evening is to weave together the coming of the railroad, the founding of the village of Eden Valley, and its early development. And hopefully I'll be able to provide some insights without going too far into the weeds. But I'm also here to learn from you. So at any time there's a question or a clarification, by all means. I truly marvel at this mural. The artist has a fantastic sense of proportion, and there's a lot to see in this picture. Not only that, it adds color to what was a black and white world back in the 1880s. So, shall we set the time machine and go back to the 1880s? Oops. See? I'm familiar with this. So there we go. This is William D. Washburn. And he's important to the formation of Eden Valley for 3 reasons. First of all, he was the creator and the moving force behind the creation of the Sioux Line Railroad that came through here. Secondly, his fingerprints are on the plat that created the village of Eden Valley. And third, he had various private businesses. Some of those became part of the early economy of Eden Valley. Washburn came from a very prominent family in Maine. His older brother, Cadwalader, had been a major general in the Civil War. And he was a leading, created one of the leading flour mills in Minneapolis, the Washburn Crosby Company. That gave the initials to WCCO, the radio and TV stations, Washburn Crosby Company. Then he had another brother, Elihu, who was a U.S. Secretary of State. And Washburn himself spent 6 years in the U.S. Congress and was later a U.S. Senator for another 6 years. He had his own Washburn Mill Company in Minneapolis. They were a flour miller, and they were also in the lumber business. In 1928, the old Washburn companies became General Mills. That's quite the background there. Now, the flour millers had achieved great success in Minneapolis, but they had a concern. There was a greater development of railroads in the southwestern Minnesota and in the Dakotas. And the fear was they were going to bypass Minneapolis, move all that wheat to Duluth Superior, move it over the Great Lakes to Buffalo, and it would be milled there. So it was a matter of self-preservation. They decided to create a railroad here. They were incorporated in Minneapolis and Pacific in 1884, and that fall, a group of about 10 surveyors went out to Tinta, that particular area, and they started the surveying towards Minneapolis, west to east. They able to come up with a feasible route. Now, railroads had a special privilege back then. Since they were engaged in transporting goods and people, they had the right to enter upon private property and do any surveying work. They also had eminent domain, which meant if they could not come to an agreement with the landowners, the land could be forced to be sold to them. There was a tale about a farmer one day noticing a group of people out on his land. So he goes out and investigates, and sure enough, it's a group of railroad surveyors. He doesn't care to have surveyors on his property, much less lose it. So he protested a little bit, and the head surveyor reached into his pocket and pulled out a black book of the rules and laws of the state of Minnesota. And he read to the farmer chapter and verse that he had a right to be there, to enter on his property, and survey. Well, the farmer could see that he wasn't going to get anywhere with that group, so he just walks back to the barn where he's got a testy bowl. He opens up the gate, and in a little time the bull meanders out of the barn and takes note of the surveyors. The bull charges at him. The surveyors go running for their lives on the other side of the fence. Well, they're at an impasse. So the surveyors start yelling to the farmer, and he slowly walks out and so forth. And surveyors ask him, "Can't you do something about that bull?" And the farmer responds, "Just read him the law. Read him the law." So anyway, the surveyors came through here probably about October 1884. And at that time, along that route, you had Glenwood, maybe Elba Lake. No, it's a little early for Elba Lake. Glenwood, Painesville, Rockford, Buffalo, and that was about it. So the rule then was just to connect the dots. And that's what they were doing as the surveyors. All was quiet until about the spring, March of 1886. And the surveyors returned, a different group of surveyors, and with them were land agents. And these were normally lawyers from Buffalo. I think there was a, let's see what his name was here. J.H. Wendell. Wendell, Minnesota is named after him. Torrey Thorson from Glenwood. And probably the land agents, what they had with them was a book of pre-printed forms. So ideally, they wanted a donation of land from the farmers and so forth. And oftentimes, that happened for about $1. Other times, they had to settle on a price. And there were people who were willing to sell to the railroad. Some, they foresaw that it was going to be a good deal for them. It's going to make their lives easier to market their crops, easier to travel. There were some that just did not want the railroad to come through their land. And in those cases, that legal right of eminent domain was forced upon them. The sheriff would serve notice, and they would proceed from that point. To settle that, each county had appointed 3 commissioners. They'd go out, take a look at the property, and assign a value to it, and take it from there. A.M. Allen of Minneapolis collected all of these land contracts, warranty deeds, and he would later file them in the respective counties. How everything came together and the future Eden Valley came to be the location for a railway station isn't clearly known. There's a book published in 1936 about the history of Meeker County, and it states in there that there was a small community called Logering. Mr. Logering was the proprietor, and apparently there was some disagreement or reluctance on his part to have the railroad built through his community. Perhaps. We just don't know, though. There's a lot that's left for mystery. The future Eden Valley was built on property that belonged to Francis B. What's his last name? Smith and Silas Cosaire. And the route taken get through Eden Valley on both sides of the town proved to be troublesome. Very quickly, in fact. Construction began shortly thereafter. By late April, there were newspaper reports of the processions of grading crews traveling to various locales to begin their work. And that construction was an exciting event. R.B. Langdon had the contract to build the railway and was first subcontracted with grading contractors that were well established. And they came in from other parts of the state with horses and their graders and plows, horses, mules, campsite gear. Some of the local farmers added to their income between the planting seasons, between planting and harvest, I should say. And at $1 a day, that was the going rate for labor. $2.50 a day if they provided a team of horses or mules. And Langdon did all the grading, built the trestles, put in the culverts, laid the tracks, built all the structures on the station grounds, with the exception of the grain elevators. Keep in mind that we're still in the aftermath of the Civil War. That carried over to the people in the 80s. And the movements and the construction and everybody, there was just the campsites, they would move them. It was all reminiscent of what went on in the Civil War. In fact, a lot of the officials and people used their military rank as a title. You had General Washburn, who was a Major General. William D. Washburn was a Surveyor General of Minnesota, so he liked to be called General. And Captain Rich goes on and on and on. Growing up, I always heard of a lot of colonels. They were usually auctioneers, however. Let's see. Unfortunately, we're going to be a little disjointed here. I think I'll go through the JPEGs and then we'll have to go to the PDFs. So we'll go through those one by one and kind of piece things together in the back end. To conduct its business, the railroad required a right-of-way, a continuous right-of-way of about 100 feet in width. And every 5 to 7 miles, they planned for a station. A station is where business is conducted. And there they required a wider strip of land, about 250 wide, 1,800 feet long. And that's what was determined for Eden Valley and just about all the other stations. The track lane commenced at Glenwood. And they headed east through here. And let's see, I forget what I all have. Let's see if I can advance these a little bit. Everybody waited on the arrival, the first smoke, if you please, of the construction train. And this is about what the rail laying train would have looked like. And set off the rails, the ties first, put the rails on tie, and then spike them down. You can see a few tents in the background. This is taken at a different location in northern Minnesota, 1907, I think, or 1910 thereabouts. This is one of the graders that would have been typically used. This one has 2 teams. And usually you had to have an operator aboard. There were some much larger graders used in Dakota Territory that might have 12, 16 horses. 3 people required to operate the grader. This was one of the early locomotives that had run through here. It's a freight engine. This picture is taken at Glenwood. Shows the engine crew, a few others, an elevator in the background. This one will enlarge a little bit. Yeah. Drag it up. Oops. See, even back then, to bring your dog along. How common that was, probably not. But that was hilarious. I'm not a skilled laptop operator here. Well, some of the files when they copied, they didn't come off too well. Yeah, if you don't mind. Yeah, please. Okay, we'll go ahead. We'll go ahead a little early, and then we'll come back to some of those and fill them in.
Okay.
Just because of the bad sort that's on here. Now there's a lot in this picture. This is of course 1890, and on the far left is a 210-foot long coaling station. At about every 35 to 40 miles distance, the railroad put in these coaling stations to supply the locomotive if need be. They didn't have to stop and put on coal at every station. Similarly, in the background, you see the 50,000-gallon water tank. They put them in at 15 to 20-mile intervals. Well, this one is an interesting photo. It's the only one I've come across that shows skirting around the base of the water tank. Presumably, that's they may have put in a steam pump at that time in addition to the windmill that's there. Usually, just to keep that from freezing, they spread manure on the ground. Now, the little locomotive in the background, that is a dainty locomotive. That's one of the original 6-passenger locomotives. It was rather colorful. It had a green stack and red driving wheels. But that could only work on some small passenger trains, probably 2 or 3, 4 cars at the most. And that's probably the Painesville local coming in the morning. What's the occasion? I don't know. They're dressed up pretty well. You've got a few railroad people. You see some baggage and some mail, perhaps, and things that you're going to put on the train. That sign is for American Express. The railroad hauled small goods that required some safeguarding, such as money, and other small shipments that, people sent furs to Minneapolis that way, just about anything, the smaller freight. American Express, of course, exists today as a financial company. They did transport cash, checks, and so forth for the few banks that were out there. The one little kid that's sitting on the far right is barefooted. And that I would not want to do. out on the streets back in 1890 or any time shortly thereafter. That platform is also high, much higher than you'll see in other photos. Jump ahead here. This is, was taken in 1907. A lot of these depot pictures are very familiar. Tom over at Lost and Found has been generous in sharing these with the public and myself. And by this time, the coaling station is gone. The water tank remains there till about 1950. But they've lengthened the depot. There is, I don't know if this was a hard rule or was in law, but as communities grew in size, the state wanted the railroads to provide separate waiting rooms for men and women and children. It's just one of the big social mores of the day. And that's why that depot was extended 24 feet. On the near end, that was the men's waiting room, where they can chew snuff and have a little flowery talk and smoke, whatever they can do. And in the back, the ladies and the children would be accommodated in that waiting room. When the railroad came through here, they built structures on the ground, first one being a 25,000 bushel capacity elevator that cost $2,750. They brought in a blinded horse to operate it, $80 for the horse. The horse would basically go around in a circle, powering a windlass. And the principle of an elevator is you have legs. There's a chain and scoop which would raise the grain to a top portion of the elevator, and then you have something called a sprout, and that would direct it to various bins in the elevator, and then you dump them in the bin. The farmers would bring in their grain crop, they would dump them from a platform into the ground. And when they went to ship the grain out, they would also dump it back in the ground and put it back in the grain car. Now, the reason why they blinded the horse supposedly is the horse would keep working, going around in circles, not knowing whether somebody was there to give it a little tap in the back or not. The horses supposedly would get smart, and if they didn't need to work, they wouldn't work. That's again just one of the mores of the time. The railroad was up and running for business on December 9th, all the way between Glenwood and Minneapolis. They were in operation earlier from Minneapolis to Buffalo. And what had happened there, while the railroad was under construction, they urged all the farmers to hold on to their grain crop. So the first priority was to get the elevators constructed, then the farmers can come in, bring their grain to the elevator, and then when the railroad line was finally open, they already had a lot of cars loaded. Kimball had something like 18 cars already under load, and then they shipped them into Minneapolis at that time as soon as the line was completed. January 1887 payroll indicates there were 7 employees here at Eden Valley. Lansing Brown was the station agent. He made $45 a month. F.M. Hutchinson was the grain elevator agent. He worked for the railroad. This was a railroad operation at that time. He got $55 a month. The section foreman was an M. Moran. He got $45 a month. There was a coal heaver here, Samuel Lord. He got $37.50. And there were 3 laborers that worked on the section crew, so they already had 7 employees. Now, here the railroads took the lead in establishing the new town sites. They did this so that they would have an orderly organization. And for whatever reason, William Washburn took the lead on all the stations west of Minneapolis. This was not typical. Usually you had a different subsidiary company that created the town sites. Now, I can only speculate why he did that, but he paid to have the surveyors come in, and he had surmising separate agreements with Francis Smith and Silas Corsair, all being co-owners of the town site lots. And later, they arranged to have their own surveying of the lots and so forth. They didn't file the actual town site until the spring of 1887. Why the delay? I don't know. Now, businesses were encouraged to come in. Usually in a lot of the towns, the first business to come in was a saloon. But, there must have been some businesses moving in here, and I appreciate a little feedback and knowledge on that. The plats were finally filed in, I think it was April of 1887. And then Eden Valley was able to blossom after that date. They started hauling the mail. At the post office was at Eden Lake. That came in about March 15th of 87, about the same time that the railroad was hauling mail through here. They had a separate rail mail service clerk aboard the train, and he probably did some of the sorting en route. They'd drop off a pouch, and pick up a pouch. So those things coincided, and the second passenger train was put on shortly thereafter. Pomeroy and Company of Minneapolis brought an excursion train, brought in some people, prospective buyers for Eden Valley and Paynesville. That was in July of 1887, so you see there's a lot of activity occurring. The new businesses also were locating, and William Washburn brought in his Washburn Mill Company and put in the first lumber yard here. In 1889, that became a Sawyer and Arnold lot lumber yard. In 1899, it became the Sulzer Lumber Company, and later John McCarthy took over ownership. And he held ownership of the Eden Valley Lumber Company for quite a while. There was a second lumber yard here for about 3 years, different owners. This was, the depots were always a focal point for nearby residents. And there's a better way to travel. 3 cents a mile is what you paid to travel. And that lowered to 2 cents and maybe even close to a penny after 1900. Small parcels of money were handled by the railway. It was agents for American Express, and the agents sent and received private telegrams as well. So he was quite busy there. People gathered at train time just to learn the news and share all the local gossip between themselves. In 1888, Washburn divested himself of so many of the businesses, including the lumber yards. The elevators became the Atlantic Elevator Company, and the real estate went over to the Pacific Land Company. So if you're doing any genealogical research, and you see these names like Pacific Land Company or Washburn and so forth, that's what's been going on in the background. Washburn himself became a U.S. Senator in 1889 for the next 6 months. Local economy, I'm going to spend a little time on this rather quickly. It interests me greatly because Eden Valley is a wonderful place in the state. As you have, the land lends itself to a diverse, here's the same depot burning in 1913. That almost burned down the town. It took out the Arlington Hotel, the depot, a few other businesses, a lumber yard. This is the same depot, 1913. See, it hasn't changed much. Cover shot, I'm not going to enlarge it. This interests me. I think I'll see if I can enlarge it just a little bit because it shows. At the top is where the current depot is. I'm going to be able to zero in on, well, what interests me in the bottom picture, to look to the right of the depot, open land. This is probably taken in the 1950s, I'm going to guess. And you see all the way in the back there, it's all open land. You've got Jack's service station there now. On the right, in that track in the 1970s, you had Animal Fair come in here. They manufactured plush animals. You had Valley Grain in there. And a rarity is to show the outhouse, many of the depot shots. That was kind of an unwritten rule back then as well. Back here.
Candy Pickle had a storage facility there too.
Ah.
Candy Pickle
Yeah.
factory has.
Well, that started as Glazier and Cone in Painesville. And Gedney was a Minneapolis company.
Yeah.
Glazier and Cone, I'm not certain what happened to them, but they had a large plant and pickling operation in Painesville. And then the whole villages all over, including Eden Valley, had their own pickling station. With a vat and-
They either raised pickles or they raised tobacco.
Yeah.
Everybody had 6, 8 kids.
And I'm going to touch a little bit here. Yeah, if you just forward that, if you don't mind. And I'm going to deal with the local economy and speed this up a bit here. Grain, of course, you got a diverse agricultural base. That, if you don't mind enlarging that, you'd mentioned that you've got a portion of a tobacco shed over in that park area. I went out there to look for it, but I'm blind at times. I
It's
didn't
amongst
quite
the
know.
trees, you can't even see it.
Ah.
Yeah, it's right in the middle of the trees.
Well, this, I believe, is, you're looking at part of the, what had been the McCarthy lumber yard, and there's mention in newspapers that part of their warehouses had gone over to a curing station. Bring the tobacco in, dry it, bundle it, bale it, and then they always get shipped out in January. So there was a definite season to it. I found reference also to Richmond shipping out some tobacco. The tobacco went to a couple different places in Wisconsin. There was a Jefferson
Most of it
company.
went for red man tobacco. Niece and Watkins, he'd buy it all from us.
Oh,
We had tobacco one year.
okay.
It was enough.
I was surprised to learn that. It's caught other people's
No.
curiosity, because normally you wouldn't associate it here. Jefferson and Sparta, Wisconsin, and Lorillard and La Crosse were apparently the biggest receivers of tobacco. I'll quantify some of that. At one time, Eden Valley had 3 grain elevators, and much of the crop went to Minneapolis to be ground into flour. And the mills there served all kinds of markets. And in 1893, there was a flour mill started here in Eden Valley, the Eden Valley Roller Mill. That burned down in, I think, 1908. It was later acquired by Neerling and Colbjörnsen, and then later Grunis and Lauer. I've got kind of a black and white somewhere on the screen that will show that flour mill. Grain was the primary crop, but of course the great mortgage lifter, the dairy cow, came around. And the railroad had added stockyards and improved them over the years, including feed stalls, water troughs, and so forth. Certain weekdays were designated as shipping days for livestock. Originally, you'd have one of a local shipper just go ahead and take care of the livestock business, but later there were different shipping associations that assumed it. GM Rulon was one of the early shippers, and he even shipped out a carload of poultry. A few snapshots. In 1917, there were 67 carloads of cattle shipped out of here. $134,000 plus dollars returned to the local farmers. Of course, they go out and spend it on more feed and the like for future shipments. And one day in 1922, there were 7 carloads of stock shipped out of here. In 1924, 173 carloads total. So it's a pretty big business. A refrigerator car was added to the local freight one day of the week. You had the North American Cold Storage Company setting up operations in Paynesville. And they get into butter and other manner of poultry and so forth. They keep growing, as you well know. I think it was in 1919 they put in a cream station here. And a much larger plant as well in Alexandria. They collected all manner of produce, dairy, and some of their shipments, cream, butter. Some of those shipments of butter in particular went to New York and Seattle. So there's quite a distance here. P.A. Miller had been one of the early potato shippers in the area, and he also became an agent for the North American Company. Again, with potatoes, Miller would advertise farmers, bring them in on a particular day, 1 or 2 days, they'd load the car, ship it out to Minneapolis or beyond. And on occasion, years later, a full carload of potatoes would get shipped in here. And apples as well. You'd get a carload of apples in the fall, and that would last the merchants here and local buyers for the entire winter. Cucumbers. Glacier & Cohen of Chicago had that large operation in Paynesville, and that promoted a lot of cucumber and pickling business throughout central Minnesota. So they had vats and loading platforms created, including in Eden Valley. Sugar beets. They were being shipped as early as 1902, initially to Menominee, Wisconsin, and later to Carver, Minnesota, possibly Maple Lake, Minnesota. And that lasted to at least 1930. Tobacco. That was one of the more surprising crops to me. And that lasted between 1928 and 1937, perhaps later. Drying and baling, those were seasonal shipments, and they were made in January.
We still raised that around here in the 1980s.
Really?
Tobacco. Lawrence Rupert had 15 acres of tobacco.
Interesting. See, this is a diverse community.
Yeah. Well,
Great.
there was a lot of tobacco.
Probably a lot of other leaves, too. Other leaves. There's a CDB sales outlet in downtown Elk River. It's called the Sacred Leaf. Touched upon fire being the devil's only friend. And, maybe if you don't mind, we can go ahead and fast forward and get to those PDFs. And, but I'd like to conclude by reading a few items from the Eden Valley Journal that illustrates how life is changing 100 years ago. 1917, Bush and Bischoff were the local Ford dealers, and they received a shipment of Ford cars. Usually you'd have a little network and racks inside of a boxcar, and they'd ship in maybe 4 cars at a time. And there might be a little more assembly required once the cars got here. 1919, Standard Oil filling station south of Eden Valley is nearly finished. 1919, Home Oil Company. They received 3 large oil tanks, and they were getting ready for business. So all the local service stations were there to aid in increased use of the automobile. Eden Valley and all the, 1923, Eden Valley and all the Sioux Line villages from Paynesville east got a bus line. The bus made a round trip a day, left Eden Valley at 6:30 in the morning, and returning, left Minneapolis at 4 p.m. And later, in 1923, additional bus service came along, what they called the Lake Region Highway. $1.95 was the fare. The buses left the Mansard Mansard Hotel, 7:30 in the morning, 4:30 in the evening, and left from Minneapolis at 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. The Liederbach Bus Company. 1923, December 27th. This is a late posting for the newspaper. This happened just before Christmas. The local PO sent out 40 sacks of mail. 1924, the plans and specifications for Highway 69, which parallels the Sioux line and forms a junction with Highway 22 at Eden Valley, had been completed, and work was going to be pushed on that. Highway 55 was a 1930s program that replaced Highway 69 and was completed out to the North Dakota border. Just as the railway in 1886 connected the communities economically and socially, Highway 55 serves the same purpose today. Now, we'll just finish up with a few of the slides. This is I cut this off of a roll map in the Minnesota Historical Society from the Minnesota Land Office. It's got an April 1886 date and shows the Minneapolis Pacific and Kennedy, Ohio, and Stearns County. I questioned the date because, well, maybe when it was surveyed, but it's definitely an early map. And it's the earliest one I found that shows Eden Valley on it. So by that date, Eden Valley is on a map. It's not a highway map, but Eden Valley is on the map. Just forward kindly. This is a part of the plat for the Eden Valley. This is the one that they surveyed in 1886 and completed during the winter and submitted and filed in Litchfield, Meeker County in 1887. That's got William Washburn, his wife Lizzie, Francis Smith and his wife, and Silas Coser and his wife, Elvira. She marks it with an X, an indication that she could neither read nor write. But that is the source document. All the other people here are paid for by the railroad. And again, it's interesting, the railroad set up the town site for Eden Valley. And Washburn, that's one of his fingerprints that's on there. There's a second part to this that shows the actual grounds and so forth. This is the railroad-owned property. The rest of it becomes private property, landowners here. And there's another part that may show the Coser edition. Just forward it. I'm going to leave with Nancy a booklet there that will have some of these original documents. If you're interested in this, I may have a few extra copies I could just give you, short versions.
Take this as a duplicate.
Yeah, just take it forward. Yeah. Okay, this is a railroad map, and what's interesting here is it shows the track arrangement for the roller mill. And that was in operation for about 10 years before it burned down. Doesn't show an elevator at this time at that part of the lot, but there's two elevators there, the stockyards. That's the railroad coal shed. And that later is acquired, and they retire that. One of the elevators takes it over for a coal shed, and they're dealing with coal. And this is part of a railroad map, and that's what's left after the flour mill burned down. And it's in two parts: loading platform, coal shed, and so forth. Elevators, stockyard on the east end. Okay, this is the flour mill. It's rather tall structure, 3 or 4 stories. And it's got the Nerling and Colbernson name on it. And that burned down, was not rebuilt. About every second or third town would have their own flour mill, usually about 250 to 500 bushel capacity. They served local markets, bales were shipped anywhere in the state, sometimes even shorter distances. And abroad, they'd also ship overseas. This is a postcard that may be in your collection here. And it's showing the station, a couple of the elevators and the water tank. And, yeah, it's just another plat map. That's the Cosera edition. I think it probably pretty well does it. Yeah. It's fun just reading the old newspapers. You get a sense of how people lived back then. Those were not enjoyable times, yes, not easy times either. Certainly not. But Eden Valley definitely blossomed. It's a pretty nice community here in a very nice part of the state. Yes?
Was there ever a maintenance or repair station here in Eden Valley, or how far apart were they on the railroad, do you know?
For locomotives and freight cars? Minneapolis had the back shop and a roundhouse. The roundhouses were put in at division points. And Lowry had, Glenwood had a 2-stall building, and but Lowry got the first big one, and they found they had problems with the water there. So then they moved that to Glenwood. Normally the divisions are about 125 miles apart. Paynesville did have a 1 or 2-story shed for their engine that ran the local passenger train. That sometimes was on, ran from Paynesville, sometimes from Lowry, sometimes from Glenwood. And that went away. Pomeroy Street, by the way, is near where that shed was in Paynesville. It's a little north-south street. And the main street in Paynesville is Washburn, spelled with an E. Hoffman, Minnesota is named for the surveyor of the railroad that came through. Again, they surveyed from the west towards Minneapolis. They built the railroad from the west towards Minneapolis. We made a final connection when they laid the rails at the east of Kimball, between Kimball and South Haven, with the Clearwater River. That was an obstacle. That's why they did it that way. Got a lot done in 1 year. Now, yeah, same thing on freight cars. Something broke down and would thump in the dark, and you had to get help from elsewhere to come in. Well, I hope you enjoyed it, got a little bit out of it. Hopefully I didn't get too deep in the weeds. Thank you. Been my pleasure. Again, I'll leave a book here with Nancy, and you're welcome to page through it. I'll probably send you a few items to add to it. Those are extras on the plat, and a few other documents in here. And I'll revise the notes here.
Thank you all for attending. We do have some things from the Tom Mathias Lost and Found collection over here. If you want to take a peek, some of them are, we share a lot around here. So some are duplicated from what we've shown. So, and again, grab coffee, water, a snack before you head out. Thank you very much.